Okay, so this is the fourth video, and we're going to be talking about data validation. And in the last video, I told you guys I was going to prove to you that those named ranges were dynamic inside these tables. So that's what we're going to do as well. So the first thing I want to show you is data validation just on the surface. So if you go to the data tab in the ribbon and you see data validation, you've probably seen it before, maybe you messed with it or didn't, but there's several options. We're going to select the first one, and in settings it says criteria. In this case what we're going to do is a list. So you can tell it to say, hey, this cell can only have a date, or it can only have a time, or it can only be 10 characters. In this case we want a list, and so you can, if you want to, type in what's in that list. You can just say yes, comma, no. So you just want to separate it by a comma. And when you hit OK, there's going to be a drop down list with yes and no in it. Alright, so you know how functional is that? How not functional is it? I don't know. It's just an example. I actually do use that from time to time. If I go back to data validation, select any value, that'll take that drop down box out of it. Again, in the name manager, I've got my list, RC list, FC list, and commodity list. So that's what I'm going to utilize. If I come into funds control, I'm just going to highlight all this in the table, and into data, the data validation drop down here, and I say list. And the source of my list, I'm going to hit equals. In this case I remember what my named range was, so FC list. And if you realize, if you see that it didn't give me kind of like a helpful hint, so I do have to remember what my list is called. But I'm going to type in FC list there and hit OK. So what it did was grab back to this list here and say, okay, that's what you wanted, right? That's the source of my drop-down validation. And when I select this, in fact, that is what I see. I see this listing here stopping with reimbursements. Now, to prove to you that it is dynamic and will change as you need it to change, I'll just expand mine by, let's just say I'll put a bunch of blank rows in there. Now when I open it up, I've got a bunch of blank rows in here, right? Well, that's not very useful, but it kind of proves the point, doesn't it? So in this case, if you wanted to put something in here like Chad's money, right? So when I come back into here, now I've got an option to say that my Pateo, whenever I look at it at the funds control level, it means it's my money, that Congress appropriated money to me, which is definitely not the case. Okay, but it proves the point, and you can just as simply add as you can delete things just as easily as you can add them. So I'm just going to delete that and move my data table up. For the rest of these I'll highlight, and the keyboard shortcut for this is Alt-DL. So I'm going to hit Alt-DL, Tab, and then hit List and Tab. So I'm going to hit equals COMM list, hit enter, prove to myself that in fact it populated with the list, and then highlight this whole one down to the bottom of this data table, Alt-DL, Tab L, Tab, and then equals RC list, and hit OK. So now each and every one of these is populated with the specific things that I've told it can be. So, you know, my RC, I have, say, Force Support Squadron, but I also split out contract quarters because I don't want my commanders thinking that contract quarters is part of the Force Support Squadron budget or something like that, whatever it is. Again, you can take these and make them what you want. And in later videos I'll show you how to expand onto this even more, but you might be able to just pick up on that as we go, as I'm showing you now. One last thing I'll show you before we leave is that now the template's going to come preset with 30,000 records or 30,000 rows of this data table, but for other uses, if you were to simply hit tab and expand this table by one, you'll see that the drop down list followed to the next line. So what wasn't there before is now there. So that's a really helpful feature and something you can use in other aspects and other tools that you may build for yourself. So that's data validation, and that's what you'll be using to define these PATEOs and build your reports. The next video will get more in depth into a couple of the formulas that we do need to use, some nested formulas, but we'll step you through them so that you can understand them. See you then.